Okay, so let's get into business. All right. Now, the anytime statement gives us the ability to regenerate a customer statement for any prior period. All right. Whereas the statement inquiry is essentially the same thing, but it's presented on the screen. All right. And it combines the tools that were previously available in our debtors transaction inquiry, but goes a bit further, all right, to help with the account reconciliation process. If we didn't have these programs, we'd be relying on archived copies of customer statements or paper copies at Document Center to be able to reconcile accounts, because typically we're reconciling them at a previous point in time. All right. These programs have been introduced in Nexus 10, so they are from 10 onwards. So a good incentive to upgrade to our latest version, and won't be available, unfortunately, in prior versions. But once you've seen them today, you will want them. All right, you'll find a use for them. All right, so both of these programs are found in the accounts receivable module and located in the standard menus, or can be found using the good old tree menu, which I'm hoping that most of you are becoming familiar with. All right, so the setup of these two programs requires two elements. All right, first of all, there is a control file option. All right, and I will just go into control file inquiries at the moment, because as you all know, changing control file options when other people are in the system is a little bit dangerous and highly not recommended. But we can always have a look at the control file inquiry. All right, and so there is a option in here under accounts receivable, under screen 2, if I remember correctly. All right, where it talks about right at the bottom here, default to the current or last period in these two programs. Now, basically what that's about is that when you go into these screens, there's a selection criteria, and will it default to the current period that AR is in, right? Or will it default to the last period? All right. Now, most sites have got it set up to default to the last period, because if you wanted something for the current period, you would use your existing statement print, your existing debtors transaction inquiry, more likely than these. You can use them for the current period, but it's more likely that you're going to be doing it for last period. Right. You can go beyond that as well, and we'll see that when we get into those programs. So that option is typically set to a last period, but can be changed on a system-wide basis in the control file. If you're unsure on how to change control file options, by all means, reach out to our support desk and we can help you with that. All right, so that's the first element of the setup. The second element of the setup is that because the statement print after end of month is a print process, it needs a forms default setup, a forms default entry set up for it. All right, and basically it needs something like this. All right, and again, if you're not familiar with forms default maintenance, reach out to the support desk and we can help you with this. But basically we just create a line where we say the report is ARSTARPA as opposed to RPT, which is the existing statement print. All right, and that we want it to be printed using fast reports, and we give it a name of a template. All right, for most people, you can just use the same template as you've been using for your existing statements. But if you want something different about the reprint template, you can create a copy of it and make some changes to it, right? And therefore have a different template name. So I've just given my template name the same name as the program, just so that I can keep track of which one that is. All right, by default, I like to set my forms like this up these days to go straight to the viewer. And what I find is that helps save on paper wastage, because basically you can view the report, go, yep, that's what I want, and then decide what you want to do. Do you want to send it to this printer? Do you want to export it out to another format such as PDF or Excel or whatever? All right, okay, so let's jump in and actually have a look at these programs. All right, so we'll come out of Forms Default Maintenance. All right, and we'll bring up the statement print after end of month to start with. So this is our new program. All right, and just so that we can compare with our existing statement print program, I'm just going to use our tree menu over here to quickly find our statement print under Accounts Receivable Reporting Statement Print. All right. So you notice there that with the tree view, I just typed part of statement and it found that in all of these various programs across the modules. If you haven't used that tree view before, have a play with it. It is fantastic. Saves you a lot of time searching for things in the menus. But anyway, let's move on. That's not what we're here for today. So let's have a look at our pre-existing statement print as opposed to our new after end of month. All right. Now you can see that the selection criteria is pretty much the same. All right, in the whole thing, that you get to choose the debtor branch, the debtor code range, the delivery run, the territory. All right, we've got all of our yes/no questions down the bottom here. All right, in the new version, they look a little bit different, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The essential difference between the two programs, however, is this time frame selection that we've got here in the middle. All right, and what that's allowing us to do is to say, I want a statement for this time frame. All right, and you can either use the year and period to nominate that time frame, or you can use a date range. All right, so let's have a look at an example, and we'll do a period-based one at this stage, right? So I'm going to choose one of my favorite customers. Hoping I've remembered the debtor code properly, Fantasy Buick. And over to there. I'm only going to run it for the one debtor, but naturally you can run it across a whole range if you wanted to. But probably when you're using this tool, you're more likely to run it for a group of customers or a particular customer one at a time sort of thing, because you'll be working on something specific. All right, and I'm just going to run it for period 2. Now you'll notice that it gives me all of these options. All right, and the thing to be aware of is that this won't go back to the start of your Nexus system. All right, so it doesn't go back to day dawn. Unfortunately, it only goes back to the start of the financial year of when you were upgraded to Nexus 10. All right, so if you were to be upgraded to Nexus 10 right now and you're in period 4, you will be able to go back to period 1 in the current financial year. All right. From there on, it will build up its time frame that it can reproduce the statements for you, but initially it'll only be for the current financial year and forward. All right. But let's go down to, I just want August. All right. I'm just going to get that one out of the way so we can stay focused on this one. And I'm going to go to the same period. You can do a wide range of multiple periods, or indeed, you know, a whole range of dates, you know, a whole year if you wanted to. Depends on what you need for your reconciliation purposes. All right. If you want to reproduce a statement as it was originally produced, then the period is probably what you're after, or in the case of non-30-day aging accounts, it's probably the date range that you would want to use. And I would suggest, as you're getting used to this program, that don't try and bite off too much in the one go. Just look at it and compare it to what you've seen previously by running it for a single period or for a single aging period in terms of the dates on a non-30-day account. Get used to the programs, understand how they work, and then you can get more adventurous and add more into it. All right. So here we go. We're going period 2, and as you're selecting your time frame, it will update this description, which will be available as a variable on your template. All right. So let's go for it. All right. I set my system default as view, so I can just go with system default. and let's view that, see what we come up with. Okay, so quite a popular customer. He's got 8 pages to his statement. You can see that it's given us the description there of August 2013, right? But it does tell us that this statement was run as at today's date, right? That's an optional field. You don't have to show that on that template. You might want to hide that somewhere down the bottom, but that information is available that it was generated on this date, but for this time period. All right. So if we run through, you can see that it's our standard statement layout. You know, it's got the standard sort of columns you'd expect. All right. And any transactions that were outstanding in that time frame are showing on there. And then we get to the end of August and we've got our totals. All right. Now those account totals are calculated for that time frame that we've selected. All right. So it's not giving us the totals that we would see if we ran a statement now. It's not as of now. It is what they were owing at that point in time. All right. So at the end of period 2, what were the totals on the account? All right. So otherwise, it's just a standard statement. And up here, because we viewed, we can go to print. We can choose whatever printer we like there. All right, throughout our list there, and print. Or we can also save it or export it out to any of these sort of formats, like a PDF, and save that somewhere, or a Word document, an Excel document, yada, yada, yada. So lots of things to play with in there. And that functionality there, that's standard for any fast report templates. All right. And hence why I set my fast report templates to view first, because see that I've got the data I want, then I can do what I want with it, rather than sending it to the printer, having to get up, walk over to the printer and going, oh, I didn't do the right time frame, or no, it wasn't the right data, and having to do it again. All right, so, okay, that's doing it on a period raised basis. All right, let's have a look at doing it on a date raised basis now. All right, so you'll notice that with this print program, it actually leaves that selection screen open for you so that you can run another statement straight away. If that was the only one you wanted, you could exit out of it like a normal Nexus program and be on your way. But you can see that it's actually remembered the data for us. We could override that, go to a different data, different criteria. But this time, I'm just going to go on a date range. All right, and I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to go from the 1st of August through to, say, the 10th of August. All right, and you can see there that you've got a calendar function available to you. All right, and if you haven't had a play with this sort of calendar function before, if you click on the month, you can see that you get the little calendar of just the months. And if you click on the year, then you get the years. So you can quickly move around in that calendar. All right, so I'm just going to go back to August, actually go to the 10th. All right, so as I've selected that date range, it's updated that description, which is going to print on the top of our statement. Okay, and remember, we can do whatever date range we like. All right, and cross over Nexus periods and pick up whatever we need to there. All right, so I'm just going to go with the same options there, and let's view that. All right, and so the first thing you should notice is that it's given us that date range at the top here for the periods such and such. All right, and still that run date. And what you should see is that when we go to the last page, it's only 4 pages long this time, there it is, it's finishing at the 9th of August. There wasn't any transactions for this customer on the 10th of August. And if you were paying attention, you'd see that those totals on the account have changed because we're at a different point in time. All right, so that is how the statement print program works. All right, so probably the important things to remember is that you've got the 2 options as to how you generate the report, whether it's by period or by date range. All right, and then once you've generated it, remember that you can use the print save options to then get that information and do whatever you want to with that. All right. Equally, you could email that straight out of Nexus as well, all right, like you would any other report. Okay, so close that. All right. So we'll move on to the debtor's statement inquiry now, and we'll see that it pretty much does the same thing, but we're seeing it as an inquiry on the screen, all right, rather than a static report. So again, this is in the AR module and in the inquiries menu, but I'm just going to use a little cheat to get to it there. That's our normal, that's our starting screen. And if we bring up the standard debtors transaction inquiry that we're probably all very familiar with, all right, you'll see that there's a lot of commonality between the two of them. Now, these two are going to be hard to get side by side, but I'll do my best. Sorry, getting lost here. Statement inquiry. All right, and so same sort of structure as we'd expect, that we get to select a debtor. Then it's going to show us the phone number, the credit limit, when they last paid, their month-to-date sales, their year-to-date sales, their payment profile, all of those wonderful things that sit up the top here of this inquiry. They're all there on this one anyway. All right, but the difference between the two obviously is the time frame selection. All right, so like our statement print, we've got by year period and we've got by date range as well. All right, so I'll just minimize that one so that we can focus on this inquiry, and I'll use the same debtor if you don't mind. And if I just put the debtor in and press OK, it's going to show me without asking me for the range. I might just change that so that you can see the numbers change here, right? Because these are the totals that you would normally see in the top right-hand corner of the debtor's transaction inquiry for that time frame. I'm going to just change it to be period 2 and period 2. All right, I just want to look at one period in isolation, and you can see there that the totals on this account have changed. All right. All right, sorry. It's my first day on the job. I've got to remember what I'm doing. Okay. So this inquiry, it's the debtor's transaction inquiry, but it's been given a bit of steroids, been given a bit of love. You can see that it's got some color to it now. It's a little bit more exciting, and it's got a few more columns here. All right, and so we've got the standard columns that we'd expect: the transaction number, the date that it was raised on, the due date. So the due date on a transaction, maybe if you haven't seen that in accounts receivable so much before, is based either on your trading terms set against the customer or the payment terms set against the customer. And that's a control file option that says how it calculates that due date. All right. Then we have days overdue as a column. All right. And you can see that some of these lines, some of these transactions haven't got a days overdue. The reason for that is the ones that don't have anything in there, if we go over to the transaction balance here, it's actually 0 on those ones. All right, so those transactions are being included in there on the screen because they were around in that time frame, but obviously they've been fully paid, right, or fully applied, and therefore aren't contributing to the outstanding balance as at the end of that period or that time frame that you've chosen. All right, so then we've got our type that we had before, our reference that we've always had, the status of whether it's opened or closed, basically indicating whether the invoice has gone into history or not. Typically, if we're looking at prior periods, then they're all going to be closed, all right, because they will have been updated to history, charges being the amount of the original transaction, payments being the amount that's been applied to it, and then the transaction balance, what's still owing on that transaction. All right. The last column, a little bit different to how we've had it in the debtors transaction inquiry. We're seeing what the running balance is after each transaction. All right, so after that transaction was $11.50 credit, no change because that one was zero. Then this one a little bit more, so it brought it back to $2.19 and so forth. And as we scroll through all the transactions that fall into that time frame, we get down to the bottom, all right, and we reach the statement closing figure, all right, which happens to match this total owing on the account. Okay, so what do these colors across the top here and the colors that we saw as we were scrolling through mean? Okay, so basically it highlights the transactions as far as the aging bracket that they fall into. All right, so these ones with the darker color are sort of indicating they're part of over 28 days, and it's only highlighting the ones that actually have a balance remaining. All right, and then as we scroll through, we'll see the different colors. All right, now you might say, well, hang on a minute. I just want to see the ones that actually impact on my balance at the moment. All right. Well, there's lots of things that we can do, but one little hack that I can show you is that these columns here are like Excel columns. So we can actually right click on them and we get all sorts of options. All right. Now, hopefully you've discovered this in other Nexus programs and other Nexus lookups as well, that you can do all of this sort of filtering type stuff. So my hint to you is, as you're looking at Nexus programs and they look fancy like this, right click on the columns. You might be surprised as to the options that you actually have. All right. So we can do filtering, right? And I've right clicked on the days overdue column. And basically what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a little sneak here where I go select all, and then I'm going to say, I don't want the ones that have got no days overdue. So I'll take the tick off null, and you just have to remember to click down here on the apply. All right, and bingo, look at that. I've just got the ones that I want now. All right, and so the color bands are becoming more obvious there now that you can see the transactions that make up each of those aging brackets. All right. So in terms of this sandy color, there is only one transaction that makes that up. That's this invoice here. All right, and just remember to look at this transaction balance column. You know, I'm still training my eye not to look over here because I'm used to that in the old debtors transaction inquiry, that it was always the last column, but it's the transaction column, that transaction balance column, that we're sort of mostly interested in. All right, so that's a little hack that we can do. And when we're doing that filtering, all we're doing is we're just impacting on what we're seeing on the screen. All right, and we can basically right click again and clear the filter and go back to everything and maybe do a different filter. All right, or another little hack that I can show you is that where the debtor that's been selected is maybe a central debtor and there are sub debtors that are being shown on this statement inquiry, you can right click, all right, on any of the columns, and you can see that there are other columns that haven't been selected. They haven't got a tick next to them, all right, and so you can add the debtor code, or indeed the name of the debtor. I'm just going to add the debtor code as an extra column, all right, so that you could then group by that debtor code. I've only got a single debtor under this one, so it's not a great example, but also you could do filtering, all right, and filter it down to a particular sub debtor. All right, so that's a good thing to have a play with. All right, and yeah, so well, right, and you can just right click, left click, sorry, and sort by that column as well. Okay, if you mess it up and you're not too sure of what you're looking at again, or you can always come up here and clear the screen and start again, or come out of the program at worst case inquire and go again, basically. All right, so I'll just go again, period 2. All right. Okay, so we're back to the standard sort of view that it starts with. So you can see that the filtering and any of the grouping or the sorting that we're doing, it just impacts on what we're seeing on the screen there and then. It doesn't remember that. So next time you're in the inquiry, it just goes back to its default view. All right. So let's have a closer look at what else we can do in this. All right, and let's have a look at this invoice here. So I've been able to just use my mouse to click down on that particular invoice. I don't have to use my arrow keys necessarily to arrow down, or my F4 to go screen at a time. Right, you can use your mouse in this inquiry. And what we can do here is, if we press enter on that, like our debtors transaction inquiry, it then launches up the sales history inquiry to show us what was actually on that invoice, or if that was a receipt, the details of the receipt. So exactly the same as what we get in the debtors transaction inquiry. All right, and then from there we can do all of our usual options that we would do, where maybe we want to reprint it and email it out to the customer, look at how it's been paid, go down to the sales order, follow it through to the GL, all of those usual things. That's exactly the same as what we've had before in the debtors transaction inquiry. So all of that functionality is available to us by basically pressing enter on the selected transaction. Okay, now another thing that I like is that this inquiry has a special way of showing us how an invoice has been paid or how a receipt has been applied. In the past, we had to press enter on the transaction, then we had to go F2 and see the payment details. We can still do that, all right? But if you have a look at the start of some of these transaction lines, see how some of them have got the little arrow at the start of them? All right, that means that it's got more information for us, basically, and it can show us how that invoice has been paid, or that credit transaction receipt or whatever has been applied. All right, so we can go here and it says, oh yeah, this invoice has been paid by this receipt. All right, so see the receipt number underneath it in italics? And it gives us the details of it. That receipt probably appears somewhere else in here. Here it is up here, sort of thing. All right, so it's repeating it. That's how come it's in italics like that, so that you know that it's just giving you that extra bit of information. If multiple invoices or an invoice and a credit note have been applied to this particular invoice, it just lists them all underneath, indented and in italics there. If we go and we look at a receipt, all right, it will tell us and list them there. So you can see that it just expands and shows us, okay? And when you don't want that information anymore, you just click on the arrow and bring it back up again. All right. Now, so that makes it quite a handy sort of tool to manipulate and try and work out, say, what a customer is paying you for, or what was the state of their account at a particular point in time, right? But even if you're having trouble with doing it on screen, remember that a lot of programs, including this one, now have this Excel icon on the toolbar, all right? And if you haven't come across it yet in other Nexus programs, all right, what that allows you to do is to export the transactional information that you've got on the screen there out to an Excel file, and then open it up and do whatever you like with it, right? And when you use this function, all right, it will default a location and it defaults a name, but anywhere on your network you can save that and you can give it whatever name you like, all right? So you're not locked in on that one, but I'll go with that. It's going to complain that I've already got that, all right? and boom, here it is in Excel. All right. All right. Got to pay my Microsoft bill so that I can use it. I'm just going to go view at this stage. Right, because we've saved it, all right, if I've saved it on the network, I could pick that file up, use it somewhere else where I've got Excel available to me. But basically we can do whatever we like to this in Excel now. All right, and any filtering and stuff like that that we've done is ignored. It's exporting the actual data for the time frame that we've nominated. All right, okay, so that is the end of what I've got to show you today. So if you'd like to head over to the Q&A panel and any questions you would like to ask, myself or Simon and Pam, who are hiding in the background, may be able to assist you with. So I'll open it up to questions.
Ross, we have 2 questions published.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't see those. I'll just go to that screen. Okay. What does the true running balance mean in the unticked columns? Okay. Yes, you're very clever to spot that one. All right. And right.
A tough question always comes from the boss.
It always comes from the boss.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually know the answer to that one. Simon, do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, that's the true running balance is handy for sort of reconciliation purposes, and it gives an idea of the running balance based on the dates. I believe based on the dates and not taking into consideration the period and year that a transaction can fall within. So the date raised may not necessarily match the period and year, and so it's sort of like a behind the scenes thing to basically get the actual running balance as of that date. But what we do to show you the statement running balance is to only consider the transactions from that period and year to more closely match what was on the period. So what was on the statement at the time.
Okay. All right. So yeah, as you saw, we can right click and add that as a column. So that's not a column that's there by default in the view, but you can certainly add that by putting a tick next to that each time that you go in. All right. And you'll see that there are other columns that are available as well. The period and the year might help understand that true running balance. All right. So I can see a question from Marie about Ross, is it recommended to only search for one period at a time, i.e. 1 month, as opposed to a period of 2 months? Look, when I first started using this inquiry and I was trying to understand how it worked, I found that it was a lot easier to start with one period. All right. So maybe in terms of understanding it, grab yourself some statements from the previous month and try and recreate them on the screen in this inquiry or the print to prove to yourself that it's working. And the best way to do that is for a single period. But then as you sort of get more comfortable with the tool, then certainly you can span it across multiple periods. And you might find that you're reconciling an account for a customer, say from the 1st of July to the end of August for the quarter sort of thing. So the programs are capable of that. It's more making sure that you've got the headspace to be able to handle that and follow what you're seeing on the screen. Okay. All right, so there was a question about the training session being available afterwards. If you send small denominations to my personal address, I can make a copy of it for you and you can replay it at your leisure. Okay, now question there, would you be able to go through on how to add a column, please? I'm assuming you're talking about the inquiry there, and that was just a right click on any of the existing columns, and then you can place a tick against ones that are missing there.
Ross, I just wanted to add one point as well, just a slight correction on something that was said earlier with regards to the period and year selection. So when selecting the period and year and you do the lookup, The dates that will be available will be from when you upgraded to Nexus 10, but that's only what's actually available in the lookup, and that's because we're populating data from the time people upgrade and going forwards and allowing people to manipulate as they're going forwards, and because we don't have historically when the periods closed in the past, but that doesn't stop you from actually entering a date or a period in year in the past and running a statement for that time period.
Okay, so they may not necessarily show in the lookup, but you could go further back. So you could go back to say 2010 sort of thing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right, okay. Yep. Well, it's a good thing I attended this training session today. I've managed to learn something as well. Hopefully other people have got things out of this as well. Any other questions that people would like to ask?
Yeah, the boss has asked another question.
Oh dear, I'm worried now. Sorry, I can't see that one, Pam.
It's at the bottom of the published.
Oh, there it is now. Sorry, yep. Okay, if the boss is asking if you filter in the grid and export, do you still get all the data or the filtered data? Okay, if you're filtering, you still get all the data into Excel. Last time I tried it, but let's see. So, well, let's go filter by type, and we'll say that we're only interested in receipts, for example. All right. All right, so I'm only seeing receipts in that time frame that I've selected, and let's take that out to Excel now. I'm just going to override the same file. All right, now if you have a look at the column F, just behind all of this, you can see that it's still exported all the same transactions. So the filtering hasn't applied to the export to Excel. But don't be concerned by that, because here in Excel, obviously you've got all of the filtering functions that you're used to in here, right? So you could straight away go, oh, okay, let's turn on filtering. I can't with this version of Excel at the moment, but turn on the filtering and go, I only want receipts, and boom, you would have exactly the same thing. All right. The filtering that you get in the inquiries is simple, I suppose. You're going to be able to do more fancier filtering and manipulation in Excel if that's what you need. So at some point you probably will take it over to Excel and do your more number crunching over there, if you like, or the hypothesis where you're going, okay, I think they're paying this one and this one and this one sort of thing. Okay, so a question from our friends at Global. Can a preferences option be added so that columns can be remembered and not needed to be added each time the program is run? That's a good suggestion for an enhancement, because certainly we've done that in the past, like with our debtors transaction inquiry, where you can nominate by user whether you want the credits to show as a positive or negative number, and it remembers that on a user by user basis. So there is that possibility that we could do the same thing in this inquiry, but at the moment it doesn't do that. But I can lodge that as an enhancement request if you like. Any further questions?